Hi, my name is Gibson, and I'm the owner and founder of the Personal Development School. This is a series about anxiety for you. And in this video, I'm going to talk about your third major tool to help you really shift and reprogram those subconscious patterns that are constantly creating anxiety. So if you haven't watched the first two parts of the series, the past two videos I've posted about anxiety, go watch them. It's important to check in and learn. And one thing that you can know sort of from the past two videos at a very high level is that anxiety is essentially a buildup of unresolved problems that are creating emotional residue in the subconscious mind. And anxiety keeps coming to the surface because our brain is wired to solve those problems and create resolution in order to basically survive. Our brain doesn't want to carry around built up problems in the background. It triggers a fight or flight state. And this is the anxiety that you're feeling. So in the past two videos, I went into a lot of how to deal with this and how to use this information. And this video is going to give you another layer. Okay. So first and foremost, we have these unresolved problems in our subconscious mind that create this emotional residue, but we add insult to injury because we make meaning out of the unresolved problems in the form of stories that we tell ourselves. So we have an unresolved problem and then we tell a story around it, and this is actually what takes anxiety at sort of a low to medium level or moderate level and makes it excruciating. So if you suffer from like really challenging moments of anxiety, these peak moments, you really want to start being aware of what stories you're telling yourself. So I'm going to give you a couple of examples, okay? Let's say I had a conversation with this woman who was a client of mine once, and her husband and her had become divorced, and she was experiencing so much anxiety. And I asked her, well, what meaning are you giving to this divorce? What stories do you tell yourself about yourself as you're going through this? And she said to me, well, I'm going to be alone forever. Nobody's going to love me. I'm going to end up sort of out on the street somewhere because I'm not sure if I can afford to take care of myself as one person. And so think of the impact of those stories. And remember, if you're telling these stories on autopilot, any passing thoughts, your subconscious is responding to as emotionally as if these are absolute truths. So here's a person already going through a divorce, already a challenging enough situation, who now is literally seriously, truly believing at an emotional level in the subconscious that she's going to be alone forever. Her husband never loved her in the first place, she also said, and she's not going to be able to provide for herself, and she's going to be out on the streets and unsafe. And so, of course, she's experiencing 10 out of 10 anxiety. And so our mind does this. It basically catastrophizes and makes these worst case scenarios up on autopilot because it's trying to show us what could happen so we can protect ourselves from it. But the problem is that would function really well if we were living in, the jungle and we had to be aware of predators and think of where they could be at all times. But when we're trying to function in a society that requires us to be emotionally healthy in order to reach our highest potential, those stories take a lot away from us instead of give value to us. Here's another quick example of this. You might think there's a problem at work and your mind might go, oh my gosh, I'm going to lose my job, and then I'm not going to be able to pay my bills, and I'm going to lose my home, and my family's going to struggle. And so you can go through this whole linear space. And if you aren't training those thoughts, if you're not able to rework those thoughts, it's going to be excruciating. So here's a tool for how to do this. First and foremost, we have to notice those thoughts. We have to notice the stories. And a good way of finding out what they are is to ask yourself, what am I making this painful situation mean? Okay, what's the meaning I'm giving to it? And just sit there and let all the painful thoughts that you are relating to the situation come up. You're digging them up, okay? And basically you're digging them up out of your subconscious. So it could be you think of losing your job and it's like, oh, you know what? I think the painful thoughts that come up are that I'm homeless, that I'm this, that I'm that. And you have to list those painful thoughts on paper, okay? So you're listing your stories, not just the problems, but the stories themselves now. And then what you're going to do is you're going to look for contradictory evidence to those stories. Is there any reason that these stories may not be true? And what this is going to do is equilibrate the emotional output. So if you start to unwind those stories and prove to yourself that they're not actually 100% true, and there's things that you would do instead ahead of time to not end up in that bad situation or worst case scenario that you're catastrophizing about, you'll start to feel the relief pouring in. And that's really important. And then if there is something that you feel like you're not 100% sure about, then you create a strategy. Okay, so don't get stuck in the stories, create strategies instead of stories. So let's say you're like, what if I do lose my job though? And what if I can't find another job? Then instead of still just catastrophizing, pause and start writing out strategies for how you would best and most effectively deal with this challenging situation. And again, just that will give your brain resolution, not just around the problems that are creating anxiety, but the stories that you're adding, which will create anxiety that becomes really painful and excruciating. So there are many more follow-up tools to come, but this is a really great third tool to get started with. And I want you to start noticing the stories you tell yourself in your mind throughout the day, because they are creating your emotional responses. And if you're not in charge of your thoughts and they're on autopilot all the time, we want to start to try to build that muscle of awareness, because it's those stories. Thoughts produce emotional output. Those thoughts are producing emotions that can create a lot of anxiety for you in your life. So stay tuned for the next episode of this. Thanks so much for being a part of this series, and I look forward to seeing you soon.